Hey there, everyone. Welcome back to Utility Sports. Really excited for this video as we look at Jay Crowder. Brian Windhorst of ESPN reported that trade talks are back on between the Phoenix Suns and the other teams in the NBA that could be potentially interested in landing Jay Crowder. Of course, if you've been in the loop, you know Jay Crowder has not played a game for the Phoenix Suns this year, did not show up to training camp. And in fact, even Brian Windhorst said on his own podcast that Jay Crowder wasn't even in the building at all over the summer. So he clearly will not play another game for the Phoenix Suns, at least in the near future. Never say never, but it's very possible that he does not. So the Suns are going to look to move him. We've talked about this before on the channel, but I think now is a good time to kind of rehash some of these potential trades and really look at what potentially the Suns could get for Jay Crowder and kind of what the market price may look like for a player of his caliber. We've seen him win so many games in his career, be really impactful for teams that have made runs to the finals. And just has been a good player for quite a while. So let's get into it. If you guys do enjoy this video, make sure to leave a like and also subscribe for more. So video preview here. We're going to look at the Suns' perspective. What could they package with Jay Crowder? Do they need to make a move? Will they make a move? What do I really think about that? Potential teams that could be interested in Jay Crowder. I have 6 teams that I've highlighted for this video with a surprise 7th team that we'll talk about at the end of the video. Then also the trade packages from those 6 teams, and we'll have that surprise trade in there as well, which is a little bit more of a prominent trade and an important one to potentially discuss as well. So let's get into it here. Trade pieces. What do the Phoenix Suns have to offer? Well, Jay Crowder, of course, is the main piece here. He makes just a little bit over $10 million this year. So when you start doing the math on that 125% rule, they can go down to about $8 million, and they can get up to about $12.5 million, maybe a little bit more, 12.6, 12.7 million, just with the spare change on the top of Jay Crowder's contract over that $10 million mark. Doesn't really give them a lot of leverage in terms of some of the players out in the market. You know, you can't trade for a $20 million player just giving up Jay Crowder, which is why some of these other pieces here are important to talk about. You look at a player like Dario Saric, who's an expiring contract that's going to be valuable for a lot of teams around the league if they're trying to get off of long-term money. Dario Saric, Jay Crowder, both expiring. So that's where you could see some teams look and maybe explore a trade here with Phoenix to get off of some long-term money if Phoenix is willing to do that. Obviously, now Phoenix could have an ownership change, which means maybe an influx of cash. Maybe it means they get a stingy owner. Hard to get stingier than Robert Sarver, though. So maybe they have a little bit more willingness to spend in the luxury tax. We already know that they're doing that currently. And Jay Crowder, Dario Saric could be their pathway to bring in some future long-term money. I talked about Lonzo Ball in a previous video. I don't have him in this one, but he's a player I think would kind of fit that criteria. Cam Payne, he's got $6 million on his contract this year and next year. So you're looking at a player that if a team was interested in bringing him in, could help you balance some money a little bit, get up to about that $16.2 million mark between Crowder and Payne. And I mean, if you wanted to do all 3 of these players, Crowder, Saric, Payne, you're up in that $26 million mark. We'll let you go and get a $30 million player. And the important part here is Phoenix has all of their own first-round picks as well. So they've got the pieces to throw picks into trades if they want to. They have a ton of their own second-rounders. Really, if they want to make something happen, they can. Of course, they have to abide by the Stepien rule. Can't trade back-to-back years of first-round picks. So if they trade their 2023 first, they by rule have to hold on to that 2024 first, so on and so forth, all the way through 2029. So there's a little bit of restriction for them, but they're basically wide open right now. They can make any move that they really wanted to, just based on how many draft picks they have currently. You know, we've seen big moves for Mitchell, Gobert. There's been a lot of big trades recently in the NBA, and I think the Phoenix Suns could be poised to be the next team to make a big blockbuster move, and Jay Crowder might be a part of that. But it's also very possible that we just see a low-level trade here, and that's kind of what I'm looking at more so here for these 6 potential teams interested that I really want to highlight and think are the most realistic options for Jay Crowder. And they're in markets right now that are teams trying to win. You look at the Milwaukee Bucks, of course, started out the year so great, lost to the Atlanta Hawks without Trae Young, which was kind of surprising. But Giannis Antetokounmpo is right in the thick of things for the MVP race again. And they definitely missed PJ Tucker to a certain extent when he left them a year earlier. You look at replacing a player like that, Jay Crowder is kind of the guy you'd want to get back to replace PJ Tucker. The Minnesota Timberwolves haven't had the start they've wanted. At the time I'm recording this, they're 5-7. Guys, don't hit the panic button too early. They've played 12 games. Remember, the Boston Celtics were sub 500 last year in December. We're looking right now at the first or second week of November. It's not the end of the world if the Wolves haven't looked phenomenal yet. Now, if they haven't looked phenomenal by New Year's Eve, we're going to really be hitting the panic button. But just give them a little bit of time, and let's see what they can really look like a month or two from now. I think that's really what's going to be the most fair assessment of them. The Dallas Mavericks, obviously you guys can tell, big Mavs fan myself. I think that they're going to have some interest in bringing Jay Crowder back in to the building. The Miami Heat would as well. Obviously they lost PJ Tucker, so we're seeing a second PJ Tucker team on here. The Bucks and Heat both lost him in the last 2 years, and they would love to replace him with a player like Jay Crowder. Of course, Crowder's already played for the Miami Heat as well. He was part of their bubble run to the championship series where they lost in the finals to the Lakers. The Memphis Grizzlies, they're the team that traded him to Miami. So you're looking at a bunch of teams that have already had him that'll be interested in reacquiring him, including the Cleveland Cavaliers. Out of these 6 teams, he's already played for 4 of them. The Bucks would be a phenomenal fit, and I think the Wolves could really use some of that leadership. So these are the most realistic teams, in my opinion, to make a trade for Jay Crowder. But remember, we do have one surprise trade at the end as well that we're going to talk about with a team that was not pictured on that final screen just a minute ago. So there's going to be more to break down at the end, but let's get into our first trade package here, and it's with the Milwaukee Bucks. I have one trade package per team, and this is one that I think actually does make quite a bit of sense for both sides. The Phoenix Suns, again, they're not getting anything from Jay Crowder right now, and the Milwaukee Bucks are reportedly shopping Grayson Allen. This is one of those that makes some sense. Yes, Jay Crowder's 32, Grayson Allen's only 27, so do you want to just do a 1-for-1 flip of guys who are 5 years apart? Not really. But when you look at the Bucks roster, their actual composition, Grayson Allen's kind of one of those guys that I feel like could fall out of some of those rotation minutes, especially come playoff time, specifically now that they have Joe Ingles, who is more of a perimeter style player. You typically wouldn't see Joe Ingles playing the 4. He'll probably be locked in as a 3 with Chris Middleton, Javon Carter, Drew Holiday. It's kind of tough to see Grayson Allen getting a ton of playoff minutes, assuming this team is healthy. So this is why you make a trade like this. You get Jay Crowder, who really fills in that 4 position come playoff time, kind of replaces some of those minutes that you're not sure what you're going to do when Giannis is out of the game. Obviously, you have Bobby Portis, Brook Lopez, but Jay Crowder gives you a different archetype, kind of that hybrid forward who's going to defend multiple positions. Now, he's not doing it as high of a level as he was 3-4 years ago, obviously, but he's still a valuable player, and he can knock down the outside shot. Not extremely consistent as a shooter, but consistent enough that you have to respect him. And some games he's going to get hot and hit 4 or 5 threes, and they could be really important in winning a playoff series. So Jay Crowder, I think, is just a better player than Grayson Allen. Yes, he's 5 years older, but this is where the Bucks get a little bit of return on that as well. They get a guy on a minimum contract in Josh Okogie, who I think is one of the litmus test players for the NBA, if you can tell if someone actually watches or not. If someone doesn't watch Josh Okogie or that many games, they would call him Josh Okogie, which is one of my favorite things about the NBA. His name's Okogie. If you actually watch him on TV or you even see him in person, everyone calls him Okogie. So he's the litmus test player. But for the Bucks, I think he'd be valuable because he's a perimeter defender. He's not a very good NBA player, to be honest with you. But what he is a hustle guy who could really fill in some of those minutes in the regular season, especially if it does take a little bit of time to get Jay Crowder up to speed in the system. Throw Josh Okogie out there. He's going to give you some of what Javon Carter does. Again, this is not someone who's going to play in the playoffs for you, but my expectation here is Grayson Allen's not going to be a super consistent playoff rotation minute guy, especially when this team's healthy with Chris Middleton. Obviously, he stepped up big last year, but with Middleton healthy, with Javon Carter, who it seems like Bud prefers right now, there in Milwaukee, and then also Drew Holiday, there's just not a lot of room. And for Phoenix, I think that they could use a little bit of bench punch at the guard spot. Obviously, right now they have a collection of players there trying to give them that. Damian Lee, Campaign, 2 examples of that. I think that this is an upgrade for them as a backup guard at the expense of a player who right now doesn't play for them at all, and Josh Okogie, who hasn't played a ton for them this year in that minimum contract on a 1-year deal. Again, they're not really missing too much. I think it could make some sense for both sides. And then we go into a trade here with the Minnesota Timberwolves. Of course, this is my second trade package here. And this one is kind of a blockbuster surprise trade. Obviously not a blockbuster in the typical sense of a star player getting moved, but it's a name that a lot of people wouldn't expect to get moved, especially at this point with how the Wolves are playing. Everyone's going to be a little worried about this. This really does make some sense for both sides, though. And this is under the notion that we get to the trade deadline. Maybe something hasn't happened yet for Jay Crowder, and maybe the Wolves never really figured it out. This is where a move would maybe help both sides, because Minnesota, looking for a veteran leader, I think that they badly need somebody who's a little bit more vocal. And we know Jay Crowder's vocal. Think about how vocal he was back with Memphis. He's been vocal with the Miami Heat, even back with the Boston Celtics, the Cleveland Cavaliers. He's been vocal everywhere he goes, right? And that's important for a team like Minnesota, who I think is missing some of that leadership this year that they had in Patrick Beverley. Not that they should have kept Beverley, but I think that they are missing some of those components that Beverley at least brought to that team. Jay Crowder could return some of that to you. You also get an expiring contract in Dario Saric to make the money work. There's campaign as well. So he would effectively be one of your top 2 point guards on the team. I think that they would opt to start Jordan McLaughlin if they did make this trade and bring campaign off the bench. Not that I love that for them. I think that they are sacrificing talent in this deal. They also get a 2023 second round pick here. And for Phoenix's perspective, some of you might be saying, whoa, why would they want D'Angelo Russell? What's going on here? They have CP, they have Devin Booker. What are they doing? This is where this makes a lot of sense, right? I talked about the bench scoring punch. The Phoenix Suns don't have that. D'Angelo Russell's never come off the bench in his career, but I believe he would be a very good bench scorer. I've been disappointed in his play up to this point this season. I'm not going to lie. I expected him to take a big step forward, to be honest, with Rudy Gobert there. I thought middle of the floor is going to be so much more open for him. Gobert's going to put so much more pressure on the rim, which kind of alleviates some of what D'Angelo Russell doesn't do in terms of putting pressure on the rim. It just hasn't played out that way up to this point. Again, we're only 12 games in, so things could change in the blink of an eye, and who knows, maybe he gets back to averaging nearly 18 points a game. But for Phoenix, think about this. Chris Paul's kind of not playing as good as he usually does. His points per game are down. His efficiency's down. D'Angelo Russell off the bench is like a sneaky good sixth man scorer type, honestly, who can also still run an offense. He's had years where he averages 6-7 assists a game. Not that he would do that here in Phoenix, but there would be no commitment to him even being in the closing lineups if they don't want to. Look at the players they're giving up. Jay Crowder not playing for them. Dario Saric still kind of recovering from that torn ACL. Campaign, well, you're just basically upgrading Campaign to D'Angelo Russell on an expiring contract. You get off of Campaign $6 million next year, it probably let you go into free agency and spend using the tax pyramid level. And it really only costs you a second round pick to see if D'Angelo Russell maybe moves the needle for you in the playoffs. And I kind of like this a lot for Phoenix. I'm not going to lie. The more I look at this for Phoenix's perspective, this is a pretty good outcome for them. Again, there's no long-term money commitment here. You're basically trading expirings for expiring, and it works really well for them. I think it's a significant upgrade for their bench unit. And D'Angelo Russell would really, I think, help this team come playoff time against some of the other teams. Think back to the play-in game against the Los Angeles Clippers. D'Angelo Russell really fueled Minnesota's win there. Not that he's going to do that consistently, but there's nights where he can do that, and that's where the benefit is here for Phoenix. The next one now with my Mavericks, and this trade is one that I'm not sure. I don't think this trade's going to get done, to be honest. I think that the Dallas Mavericks are going to have a lot of interest. It's just hard right now to see Dallas wanting to part with anything super valuable. I think Dallas wants to keep a lot of their mid-level contracts together so that they could later package them for a star-type player. So it's tough to see them giving up some young players or anything really of substance. That being said, I have them trading the guy who's starting at center for them right now in Dwight Powell, who, I'm just not a big Dwight Powell guy myself, but I think he could have some value in Phoenix. You put any good athletic center next to Chris Paul and their production goes up. So I think Dwight Powell could find himself doing that. Similarly, he's not nearly as good of a defender though as Bismack Biyombo or DeAndre Ayton. So that's where you get a little bit of the flaw here for Phoenix. This would maybe be a good archetype for a 3-team trade where Dwight Powell would go to a center needy team, maybe a team like the Lakers, and some other remedial pieces go back to Phoenix to help some of their depth issues, specifically at guard and wing. But I also have the Mavs giving up a second round pick, and Jay Crowder would be a perfect addition for Dallas. I've been talking on the channel here for a year about how Dallas needs a third defensive wing. Josh Green's been playing that way this year, but in the playoffs, I'm not sure how much we're going to rely on him. I think Jay Crowder could probably help a lot in that area. Now, the one issue here, Jay Crowder does want to start, so he's probably not going to do that in Dallas. But you never know, right? Maybe he's accustomed to being the sixth man here in Dallas because that's where he kind of started his career. Maybe that's where, if there's discussions between management, Crowder, about trying to get his value up before free agency, maybe they could try and make something work. It's just a little bit of a different situation. Part of why I feel like he wants to be a starter in Phoenix is because it basically feels like a demotion going from the starting lineup to not. Whereas if you get traded to a new team and the entire plan is, hey, we're bringing you off the bench, but we're giving you 25, 30 minutes a game, maybe Crowder feels a little bit differently about that. But that's something I'm not exactly sure. Obviously, I haven't had personal discussions with Crowder about that. So this is kind of speculation on my part. The next trade here is with the Miami Heat. And this is one that, again, I don't really think is going to get done, but I could see the idea from both sides. Jay Crowder and Dario Saric, two expirings from the Phoenix Suns, go out the door to Miami. And in turn, Phoenix gets back Duncan Robinson and a 2026 second round pick. The second round pick here is one of the more important parts of the deal, actually. Getting that asset, I think, would help them maybe make some other moves later. We've seen them be aggressive in the past with some of their picks. Last year, they traded for Aaron Holiday at the trade deadline. James Jones has been aggressive towards the trade deadline. I think this year is going to be another example of that. And he's got some of these expiring contracts to really play with and move around if he wants to. And Duncan Robinson's a good option to buy low on right now. The last year and a half, he's just not played super well. I think in there somewhere, in the right offense, the right system, next to the right point guard, Duncan Robinson could still be really valuable. And, I talked about Chris Paul kind of fallen off a little bit, his efficiency, scoring. Well, the passing hasn't, the playmaking hasn't. He's still a savant. He reads the floor. And a player like Duncan Robinson would probably shoot the most open shots he's ever shot playing with Chris Paul, because the ball is going to be consistently in his shooting pocket. He's going to be able to gather, shoot as quick as anybody. And he's going to have a lot of space doing it, running off of DeAndre Ayton screens and just in some of that Monty Williams style offense with Devin Booker around him. Miami is really reliant on Robinson to score the ball and to shoot the ball when he's on the floor for them, because their half-court offense just quite frankly isn't as good as Phoenix is. So Phoenix, think about Booker. You don't want to leave him. Ayton's kind of a little bit of a post-up threat himself. Chris Paul in the pick and roll, you just don't want to give him open mid-range jump shots still, even though he's struggling a little bit more this year. So there's more weapons around him in Phoenix. If he were to go there, Robinson could be successful. And for the Heat, they would feel like this is an upgrade for this season. They want to compete. They want to try and win a championship. Remember, they were one game away from making the finals last year. So do they feel like Jay Crowder is a significant step in the right direction for that? I think that they would feel that way, which is why they would ultimately try and make a move like this one. The next trade here now, sending Jay Crowder back to Memphis, where he had a lot of value playing for that young Grizzlies team and kind of was a really important piece in the development of John Morant, Jaren Jackson Jr. And this trade makes a lot of sense for Memphis. It's a little bit harder to visualize this from Phoenix's perspective, just because they're also pursuing a championship. So trading a player like Jay Crowder to someone you might have to face in the playoffs, not something I would necessarily advise. You don't really want to help some of your rivals out, and this is what Phoenix would be doing here. But at the cost of 3 second-round picks, it gives Phoenix more flexibility at the trade deadline to make other moves. Again, this would be an example of maybe working into a 3-team trade where you send Danny Green's salary elsewhere with some second-round picks, maybe a first-round pick, and you get something done, right? This is where that would have to work out. Again, the issue, though, Phoenix is trading for a player with a torn ACL, so they're not getting any immediate help right now for this season in this trade, so they'd have to have something else lined up, which is why I don't see this one as likely. But I think the money works out so well. Jay Crowder would be perfect back in Memphis. I think it gives them another really reliable 4-man option. Obviously, they drafted Jake LaRavia, David Roddy. Come playoff time, are they going to trust the young guys? They did last year with Zaire Williams, so maybe they will. But at the same time, having a veteran in the room, Jay Crowder, someone you can rely on in key situations, might be good for that team. Then we go into the one with the Cleveland Cavaliers here. And this trade is an intriguing one for both sides. Cleveland right now, they're playing so well. Donovan Mitchell obviously was such a good acquisition for them. I was super high on that trade when they made it. I think it was a pretty steep price to pay, but you look at their core, you've got a whole bunch of guys who are 26 years old and younger, and the team's winning. So you kind of want to reward that a little bit. Get a player here in Jay Crowder that can help you. You also get a second-round pick. And this is Kobe Altman here admitting fault on the selection of Isaac Okoro, who gets traded to Phoenix, and also admitting fault essentially on Dylan Windler, who was a late pick. Doesn't really matter as much. The Isaac Okoro one, though, a top 10 miss. And miss is a key word here for him because he's not a good three-point shooter, which is part of the reason why Cleveland would have to give him up. Playing those two bigs together, Mobley and Allen, there's a lot of benefits to it. But one of the downfalls is you want to have a small forward who can stretch the floor a little bit and knock down open jump shots. Isaac Okoro just doesn't give that to you. So moving off of him hurts here. This is not maximizing value. But this is Cleveland saying, hey, we believe we can compete. We don't have our first round pick this year, so bringing in another second might actually be important for them. And if we're going to make a move like this, we believe we can win a lot, win a playoff series, maybe two of them. And who knows, if we get hot at the right time, maybe we can make it all the way to the finals. That's kind of the MO here for Cleveland if they were to make this trade. And for Phoenix, it's an opportunity to bring in a player who was a former top 10 pick. He's under contract for another year, gives you a little bit of time to see what you got in him. And it really only costs you a player who's not playing for you currently already. So if Isaac Okoro doesn't make your playoff rotation, doesn't really have too much of an impact for you, there's really no harm here for them, because ultimately if they just go through the trade deadline, don't trade Crowder, they're going to lose him in free agency for nothing anyway. So if Isaac Okoro amounts to nothing in Phoenix, there's really no loss here for that team. And then we get to the surprise trade, and this is the one I'm really excited about. Kevin Durant goes to Phoenix, and they instantly become the title favorites, and one of the best teams in the league, if not the best team in the league, because Devin Booker, Kevin Durant, Chris Paul, DeAndre Ayton, all on the floor together. That sounds like a lot of baskets. That team's going to be very efficient. They're going to play good defense because they have a smart point guard and a quality center playing defensively. And you've got a lot of length around that. Devin Booker's really stepped up his game on that end of the floor. Once Cam Johnson's healthy, we know what he would be for that team. And Kevin Durant is Kevin Durant, one of the 10 best shot creators of all time. And one of the 10 best shot makers of all time. He hits so many tough shots. It would give Phoenix a new element into their offense. Of course, as of late, Brooklyn's been playing a little bit better, so there's no guarantee Kevin Durant gets traded anytime soon, especially since they promoted Jacques Vaughn. They've just been playing better. But the Nets, when you look at them from this option here, this is very likely something that would turn into a 3-team, 4-team trade. Jay Crowder would go to one of those 6 teams we've talked about already. And the Nets would bring in some of these other pieces, maybe a couple second-round picks from that. Dario Saric would maybe get sent somewhere, although I could see Brooklyn just saying, hey, we'll just eat him and let him expire on our contract. And it's really about Mikal Bridges here and 4 first-round picks for Brooklyn. You get a 2023 first, 2025, 2027, and that 2029 first-round pick. Now, for Phoenix's perspective, I think James Jones should finagle over the protections on that. I have it labeled as lottery protected here. I think Phoenix needs to be really careful about that 2029 first and any type of trade for Kevin Durant. I think that they should even be careful about that 2027 first round pick, to be honest with you, but I could see them being a little less hesitant on that one just because it's not as far out. But you think about it, you're trading for a 34-year-old player. One of your best players is already 37 plus in Chris Paul. You know, by the time 2029 rolls around, Chris Paul will have his Hall of Fame jacket, and heck, Kevin Durant might even as well. You never know. So, I mean, it's one of those things that if you make that trade, you have to be careful about that long-term first, but winning a championship pretty much justifies any single move you make. And I think it would be very likely that this team could actually compete and maybe even win the championship with Kevin Durant on their roster. I'm a big Mikal Bridges fan. I'm probably one of the leaders of the fan club. I think this is a pretty good offer for the Nets, honestly, 4 first-round picks and Bridges for a guy who doesn't really want to be on your team, as indicated by his trade request. And getting a player who right now is averaging 16 points a game, one of the best defenders in the world, and he's at a premier position. Anytime you can get good wings, that's what you want, right? I talked about this at length on the channel in a trade video for Kevin Durant. I went through every single team in the league, what their best realistic offer was for Kevin Durant. Obviously, some teams did not have good offers or teams were not in a position to trade for Durant, but I really recommend this video. It came out within the last week, so just go back on the channel. Go watch this one if you're interested. I'll try and put a card for it here as well. So hopefully you guys get to see this video. But thank you guys all so much for watching. Really excited for this trade season. I think there's going to be a ton of stuff going on in the NBA. So thanks again so much for watching. Make sure to leave a like and also subscribe for more. And we'll catch you guys in the very next Utility Sports video.